All right, now that you have a bit of an understanding about the ABCs and how we learn behavior, talking about reinforcement and punishment are going to fit right in with that. So reinforcement and punishment are consequences. And now we know that consequences always happen after behavior, and this results in the behavior happening or not happening in the future. So in ABA, reinforcement and punishment are defined in terms of how they impact behavior. So first, let's talk about reinforcement. Reinforcement refers to something that is either provided or removed after behavior occurs. And this increases the likelihood of that behavior happening more in the future. So reinforcement means that behavior is increasing or being maintained, and it's happening a lot. In the examples previously mentioned, getting candy would be considered reinforcement, because being given candy after asking for candy is likely to reinforce or strengthen the behavior of asking, and it will likely result in more behavior happening in the future. Punishment is the exact opposite. It refers to the addition or removal of something after behavior occurs, resulting in the behavior happening less or stopping happening altogether. So punishment really decreases behavior and makes it not happen that often. So in the example of taking a child's iPad away after they hit their sister would be an example of punishment if it results in a decrease in hitting behavior. Let's talk about a few more examples of reinforcement and punishment. The key to note here with these examples is that these are only considered to be reinforcement or punishment if they actually result in change in behavior. So if you're taking your child's iPad away after they do something, and they're continuing to do that thing, this is not functioning as punishment. If you're providing praise for your child doing something and they're not going to continue doing this behavior, this is not functioning as reinforcement. So there needs to be some impact on the behavior, which results in future behavior occurring or not occurring. All right, let's talk a little bit more about reinforcement. As we've said, reinforcement is something that is either added or removed after behavior occurs. And this results in the behavior occurring more or continuing to occur. So there's two types of reinforcement and there's two types of punishment. There's positive reinforcement and there's negative reinforcement. So if we are adding something after behavior occurs and it results in the behavior happening more, this is positive reinforcement. So you can think of it like positive is adding something. Think of a plus sign. And if behavior is occurring more, this is reinforcement. The other type of reinforcement is negative reinforcement. So if we are adding something after behavior happens, that would be positive reinforcement. So if we're removing something after behavior occurs and it causes the behavior to occur more, this is negative reinforcement. So you can think about it as negative, meaning remove or taking away. Think of a minus sign or a takeaway sign. And if the behavior occurs more, that's reinforcement. So typically with negative reinforcement, you're removing something that the person doesn't like. So in ABA, negative doesn't mean bad, it means removing or taking away. Let's do a few examples here. So positive reinforcement, some examples might be getting candy, getting money, getting hugs or tickles, high fives, getting praise, getting access to your iPad or your favorite toys. These could be positive reinforcement. Examples of negative reinforcement would be your headache going away, the sound of the alarm stopping, the sound of the car chime stopping when you haven't put your seatbelt on yet, crying stopping, whining stopping. So think of a baby crying. You hear the baby crying, that's the antecedent. You pick your baby up and they stop crying. So your behavior of picking the child up is more likely to happen when crying happens because we're trying to do something to have that crying stop. And let's talk a little bit more about punishment. When we hear the word punishment, we tend to think of this in a negative way. Maybe it brings up old feelings for us or puts us in mind of different things that have happened or things that we've heard. In ABA, the term punishment is used to refer to a consequence that's provided after behavior occurs, and it results in a decrease in that behavior. So as we mentioned before, there's positive and there's negative. So positive means we're adding something, negative means we're removing something. So if we're adding something after behavior happens and this results in the behavior occurring less, this is positive punishment. So again, think of the plus sign. So maybe you give your child additional chores to do, or they get extra homework at school. Maybe they get a reprimand, or they get yelled at, or they feel pain when they burn their finger. These would all be considered positive punishment, and they would result in the behavior happening less. If we are removing something after behavior occurs, and it results in the behavior happening less, this is negative punishment. So some examples might be removing your child's iPad, taking their allowance away, removing access to recess, removing privileges, giving them a time out. So taking something away or removing something after behavior occurs, resulting in the behavior happening less.